On the old frontier, the very shot of whiskey a man drank to fight the cold is the same thing that froze him solid, because that warm glow rising in his cheeks was his own heat bleeding out into the storm. Before we go on, subscribe to The Cold Frontier and ring the bell for the next forgotten story from the days when surviving the cold was a skill, not a setting. If you've ever felt that whiskey warmth spread through you on a cold night and trusted it, stay right here, because that feeling is the trap. Picture a trapper named Eli. Night falling over the bitter roots, the snow coming in sideways, hissing across a dark ridge like sand. His rifle's leaned against a snow-covered pine, and honestly, he trusts the little flask in his coat more than he trusts that gun. Dented steel, rye whiskey. He pulls it out with stiff fingers and takes a long, slow pull. And he feels it. The burn slides down his throat and blooms out into his chest. His cheeks go hot. His ears go red. That deep shivering that had him rattling a minute ago, it eases off, quiets. Let's go. Eli breathes out and he thinks, good. The cold's backing down. That warm glow was the last mistake plenty of frontier men ever made. So let me walk you through the whiskey warm-up myth, one of the deadliest things settlers, trappers, and mountain men ever believed in, a thing so many men trusted right up until the snow kept them. And here's what nobody told Eli about that glow. What's really happening when the whiskey hits you? Alcohol opens up the blood vessels sitting right under your skin, throws them wide. The old-timers had a name for it. They called it firing the blood. And that's exactly what it feels like somebody stoked a furnace behind your face. But feel your own face for a second. That heat you'd feel from a drink. That isn't the cold losing. That's your warmth walking out the door. Because here's the cruel piece. All that warm blood doesn't come from nowhere. It rushes up out of your core, up out of your chest and your gut where your life is. And it floods into your face, your hands, your ears. It feels like heat arriving. It's heat leaving, every bit of it. Think of a cabin on a winter night, one good fire banked low in the hearth, holding the whole room warm. Now, somebody throws the door wide open to the blizzard. For one breath, the heat pours out past you, and you feel it on your skin, warm as anything. And then it's gone, out into the wind, and the room behind you goes cold to the bone. That's the whiskey. It didn't warm Eli. It opened the doors and let the cabin fire out into the storm. And the flush isn't even the part that killed them, because after the warmth comes something worse, the cruelest trick the cold plays. The moment the shivering stops, that's the furnace shutting off. See? All that shaking, that teeth-rattling shiver, that's your body working. That's the fire inside you burning hard, throwing off heat the only way it knows how. And a man hates that feeling. He wants it to stop. Then the core cools 1 degree too far, and it does stop. The shivering just quits. And in that sudden stillness, a frozen man feels something he swears is peace. That's the fatal calm. That's the cruelest trick the cold ever played out there. Picture Eli again, out under the bitter roots, the flask of rye empty in his coat now. He's stopped shaking. The wind's still hissing sideways, but he can't feel the bite of it anymore. So he sits, just to rest his eyes, just for a minute. The snow under him feels almost soft, almost like a bed, and that last little bit of warmth spreading through him. That's the whiskey's lie finishing its work. He lies back. He feels warm. And come morning, the snow's got him, and Eli never rose. And here's the part that ought to scare you honest. Every man it took felt warm right at the end. Comfort was the last thing they felt. That's the whole cold truth of it. Comfort and safety were never the same thing out there, not once. So if the bottle was the lie, what was the truth? Keep this next part in your bones. It's the difference the old-timers paid for in fingers and toes. The men who lived did the opposite of everything the whiskey told them to do. The bottle threw the cabin doors wide and let all your heat pour out into the storm. These men kept the doors shut. They kept the core hot and let the edges fend for themselves. Cold fingers, cold ears, a cold nose. They'd take all of that, gladly, as long as the fire stayed banked deep in the chest where it counts. And real heat, they knew, comes from fuel inside you, not from a bottle. A pull of rye gives you nothing to burn. So they ate before the cold ever set in. Fat and meat, mostly. Thick strips of it, cured or fried by a low fire, eaten down while there was still light. Grease on the fingers, sitting warm in the belly. That's what fed the body's own furnace through the worst of the night. A hungry man freezes. A well-fed one burns. They stayed moving, too. They didn't sit and wait on the cold. An axe biting into wood, breath steaming out white in the freezing air. A slow circle walked around the camp, boots packing down the same track over and over. Keep the legs going, keep the blood working, and it won't pool and cool the way it did in the men who sat down, and how they dressed. That mattered as much as anything. Wool and furs layered loose, never tight. Loose, so a little sweat could breathe out through the weave instead of soaking in and freezing hard against the skin. Damp underneath is a killer. Loose wool held the warm air close and let the wet escape. But moving and eating got a man through the day. The long night in the cabin was its own battle, and the ones who lived didn't fight it with one roaring blaze. They fought it with a low fire, a handful of river stones, and one quiet trick at the foot of the bunk. That low fire was the whole secret, and most men never learned it. They'd stack the hearth high and get one roaring blaze, orange and loud, throwing heat across the whole cabin. Felt like winning. But a fire like that eats itself. By midnight, it's ash and a red coal or two, and the cold comes creeping back in through the logs while a man sleeps. So the ones who lasted did the opposite. They banked a low fire, small, steady, fed slow. A bed of coals under a heavy log, damped down so it burned quiet all night instead of blazing itself dead by midnight. Less flame, more morning. Then came the trick I like best. Down at the fire's edge, they'd set a few flat river stones, smooth ones, and let them soak up the heat while supper cooked. When it was time to turn in, they'd pull those stones out, wrap them in an old cloth or a scrap of wool, and lay them at the foot of the bunk under the furs. A stone the size of your hand holds heat for hours. You curl small around that warmth, knees up, and your own body keeps the little pocket hot till dawn. This one right here, the stones at the foot of the bunk, is the one I'd want you to remember if you remember nothing else. And the drink? They warm the drink, not themselves. Think about that. Poor Eli had his flask of rye, that burn sliding down, feeling like a friend. The men who lived carried something else. A tin cup of hot broth, or melted snow gone to tea, held in two bare hands. Real heat in the cup. Steam on the face. No liquor to open the doors and let the cabin fire out into the storm. That was the answer to the flask all along. You don't want the burn. You want the steam. They were honest about frostbite, too. Honest and plain. When a nose or a fingertip went waxy white, pale, stiff, no feeling left, they knew that was the frontier's last warning, the one you don't get twice. And here's what they'd learned the hard way. You never rub it with snow. You never thaw it fast by the fire. Warm a frozen part wrong and it's a part you lose. They kept it simple and slow, and today you'd get to a doctor, plain as that. But the old rule still holds. Waxy white means stop and take it dead serious. And now you know the whole lie of it. The whiskey didn't fail these men by feeling cold. It killed them by feeling like the cure. That warm flush, that easy calm, that voice saying, "Sit down a minute and rest." It wore the face of comfort the whole way down. Comfort and safety were never the same thing out there. The men who forgot that difference are the ones the snow kept. So here's the creed the old-timers left us, and it's a short one. Keep your fire inside you. Keep moving. Keep your head clear. Do that, and the long night lets you go come morning. Eli trusted the bottle. The ones who walked home trusted the fire on the inside. That's a story that damn near got lost. If it's the kind you'd sit up for, stay here by the fire with me. There's another forgotten one coming, and I'd be glad of the company when it does.